clear and present detour on the road of everyday life. The Unexplained Files. Heroes and Heroines File. The Free Range Talent File. The Ain't Love Grand File. Michael Shawn's Campfire. It's a one-of-a-kind worldwide transmission.
You're listening to the Free Range Texan podcast
with our host, Michael Shawn.
Welcome aboard, my friends, the Free Range Texan podcast, episode 20, and we're rolling. We have a special guest that we're going to spend most of our time with today. Now, I know we kid around a lot on this show, and we have an unexplained file. Joe Taylor explains a lot about something that we have been promising to talk about on this podcast since episode number 2. Giants walking the face of the earth. Well, first of all, for those of you who are just listening and you haven't had time to binge back on past episodes, Joe Taylor is a modern-day Indiana Jones. His base of exploration is a place called Mount Blanco Fossil Museum in West Texas. He is known worldwide. He is respected all across the United States and around the world for his work on archaeology digs, and many times is brought in to oversee and run an entire archaeological dig. Now, Joe knows about a lot of things, and he has some interesting ideas about real, live giants. So hear me now, believe me later. Oh, yes, of course, we just left enough room right at the end of the podcast for you and I to be able to go on down to the campfire. It's all part of episode 20 of the Free Range Texan podcast. Have digital microphone will travel. Oh, hi. This is Michael Shawn. Turn the horses out. Let the dog in. Mute the phone. Check your email later. It'll be there. Pour another cup of cowboy coffee. You're listening to the Free Range Texan podcast. And now, once again, it's time for another Free Range Texan Unexplained File. Mount Blanco Fossil Museum in Crosbyton, Texas, where a tremendous amount of research has taken place over the years. That is the home base, the headquarters for Joe Taylor. Joe Taylor, it is good to have you back on the Free Range Texan podcast.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Joe, the reason why we're talking to you today is because I have heard you mention several times when you were speaking to larger groups of people, and that you have a number of acquaintances who have spent their life researching the idea that not only are giants real and have walked the face of the earth. Again, I know you just got back from a trip where you and 4 or 5 other guys hiked miles into the wilderness and studied quite possibly an actual giant or a fossil of the bone structure of giants. Where do we begin, Joe? There are a lot of people who have trouble believing that there were really such things as giants on Earth. How did all that come about?
There are 2 sources of antiquity. One, of course, is the Holy Bible that talks about them from the very beginning in Genesis and forward. You also have the ancient so-called myths, which probably are more truth than myth. The Greek myths and all those other ancient religions talk about giants. You also have the Greek Jewish historian who told about giants. He said many of their remains were still on display in the 1st and 2nd century AD. So giants, they figure into almost every culture in the world. The reports of their remains being dug up, or their mummies being found, or the footprints being found, or just their stories occur everywhere all over the world. Huge stone caskets found in Alaska with men 10 or 12 feet tall in them, the skeletons. Why don't we see their bones in the museums? If there's so many of them have been found, where are they? There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, most museums have been taken over by the atheists and the evolutionists many, many decades ago, and they do not want anything in there that at all corroborates what the Bible says. They tell a completely different story than the history of the earth to make the Bible seem like it's not true. Were they to display 1 or more giant skeletons, 9, 10, 12 feet tall, of which there are hundreds, have been found all over this country, it would give too much. They'd have more people come look at those things than they would a T-Rex. And people love T-Rexes. But they would also then have to answer, the conclusion would be, well, so is the Bible true? It's talking about David and Goliath and all these other giants. Well, the Bible is true there. Is it true everywhere else? No, they really were here. They probably still are here. There are reports over in Kandahar, I believe that's in Afghanistan. There's also reports in India and other places of men 12, 14 feet tall alive today, or who have been recently killed. There are many, many other rumors, which we don't need to get into here. I can tell you, though, right here in the state of Texas, we're right here in the middle of West Texas, where the Llano Estacado and the erosion from Noah's flood has carved back all the land from the coast right up to us here. And the abatement stopped. When the water ran back in the ocean after Noah's flood, it stopped right outside Crosbyton, right outside of Lubbock. We've been here a long time. Go down to Glen Rose, Texas. There are big footprints down there. There was a man 18 feet tall, which is incredible, dug probably out of sand down at Seymour back in the 30s by an oil prospector, was examined by several doctors, and then the last report we had, they were going to hope to get the Smithsonian involved. And when you read that, that's a kiss of death, because that means you'll never see them again or hear anything about them.
Were they actual just human beings, maybe a regular person that had a huge hormone imbalance of one type or another, or were they, in fact, a separate, shall we say, race that were genetic giants? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yes, there's a double dilemma here. For the evolutionists, the unbeliever, the atheists, the so-called scientists, they cannot acknowledge that there were men 12, 14, 20 feet tall who were not just ill, but they were soldiers, because it sounds like the biblical Nephilim. On the other hand, people saying, well, all giants today are just acromegalyaks. Well, that's not entirely true.
Now, wait a minute. Whoa. Back up. Repeat that word, and for the regular folks, explain what you mean by that. What does that term mean?
Okay, the condition of acromegalia is where generally the pituitary gland acts up and the body begins to grow after age 21, when generally in mammals like us, our bones are fused and we grow no further.
Okay.
But if the pituitary acts up or acts up at an earlier age, people will grow to maybe 9, 10 feet tall, but they're generally so in such bad health they can barely walk. They're certainly not soldier material. But acromegalia cannot explain the thousands and thousands of reports of giants, whole armies of them. It doesn't explain Goliath. It doesn't explain the men over there in the Numbers 13:33, where it talks about, it made us people look like grasshoppers. They were as tall as cedars. Well, any old cedar could be 20 feet tall. Now, that's the second horn of the dilemma. If they're fathered, if these things are not acromegaliacs, and if they're not just large people, the Bible is talking about the sons of God being the fallen angels who rebelled against God, who came down and married human women, and their offspring were these vicious, terrible giants. That is a problem for a lot of Christians, because they read Matthew 22, I think, says that the angels of heaven do not marry, or are given in marriage. And they read that to mean no angel can possibly marry and procreate and have children. It doesn't say that. It just says the ones in heaven. Well, if those angels fell, like thousands or millions of them did, and came to earth, there's nothing that says they couldn't marry. A lot of Christian pastors and others would just go berserk when you suggest that the sons of God were the actual fallen angels rather than the sons of Seth. I've looked at that thoroughly. It does not say the sons of Seth. It says B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, the sons of Elohim. That's were the ones that fell. And they married the daughters of men, Bat Adam. That means the daughters of Adam. That means any and all colors of Adam's daughters. That's who they were marrying, not just the daughters of Cain. Rebelled against God and married women, which was not supposed to be. Mexico, Peru. Archaeologists have always been amazed that, wow, these advanced, we always make them advanced societies, cultures just sprung up out of nowhere with these giant, well-made pyramids in line with the stars, with apparently knowledge of astronomy, and they're laid out on ley lines and all this. How could little primitive guys down there in Peru do that? Well, if you bring in the fallen angels again, who were driven out of the Middle East by David, they went other places because they're avoiding. David's going to kill them all. They come to Peru, go, hey, y'all, look here what we can do. So they showed them how to move all these huge stones and do things to worship them. And so pretty soon you've got a full-fledged culture that has no explanation because they avoid the Bible story.
There is such a large number of people who buy what basically is being sold by popular television programs and so on and so forth, that they believe that the giants are a remnant, extraterrestrial visitors that visited the earth hundreds or thousands of years ago. Part of the, for lack of a better term, residue from those events is the race or culture of giants that came from their visitation here on Earth.
Now you really muddy the water. That's another huge thing that's come into play in this whole study of paleontology, giantology. All this stuff is like, well, how do we explain them? I have seen paleontologists who will not believe in God. They will not accept the Bible, scramble to explain giants. And finally, what they said was, I know, it's aliens. Yes, it's aliens. They came here from outer space hundreds of thousands of years ago and seeded the earth and put us down here, and there is no God. None of this God, Bible, Jesus, Adam stuff. No, that's true. It's all aliens.
That seems to be the go-to default. 10
or 20 years ago, anybody with a PhD in any of those disciplines, if they were suggested that there's such thing as aliens and they brought us all here they would have been summarily fired. And now today, no, because the evidence is so great that the Bible is true, and that's the origin of giants, the origin of all the fossils and all that stuff, is so overwhelming that they have to go for something that had been fired for 10 years ago, believing in aliens. And now, what is there to this alien thing? Okay, you got to go back to the fallen angel business. If the fallen angels can go through the air, they can fly, they're angels, they can appear and disappear, could their sons and daughters, the offspring of these human women, will they have these extra powers? There were some of them really huge. Did any of them have wings? I don't know. There's a lot of questions here, but they're good questions, and they should not be avoided. I want to know the truth. I'd rather know the truth than to act like I never made a mistake. Like these scientists told me one day, they said, well, we have our paradigms. I said, yeah, what's that? Well, a paradigm's something you believe and hold to regardless of the introduction of new information. Okay, so you guys really are not scientists. You just have a belief system that you don't want challenged. Well, that's not science.
Joe, I heard you speak at a conference recently, and you told a story about the cave that you were in and the people that you were with, and you were interrupted during your investigations on that trip, and all of that made for a very interesting story. But it's the story where the handprint was on the wall.
Well, let me say this. People that run the National Park Services are generally speaking atheists, evolutionists. That's who hires them. They don't believe there's any such thing as giants. So how could there possibly be a giant handprint anywhere, right? So if there's no giant handprint anywhere, me and these other three guys must be lying or deluded or something. So we went to this cave. A hardened researcher named Don Monroe and another one, M.K. Davis, were exploring Lovelock Cave out in near Winnemucca, Nevada. It's kind of made into a touristy place now. You can go and go up a road and go into the cave. They've covered up all the deep cavities where they went into the other rooms of the cave. They were in there looking around and noticed here's this on one of the walls, what appears to be about a 14-inch long handprint that like someone had put their hand in paint and slapped the wall, kind of a flat wall. So they took a photograph of it, thinking, if we don't put this out there, get rid of it if they ever find it. And, of course, if they put it out, then who says someone won't do something to it? So they called me out there, and this other guy, Ron Moorhead, who's also a world-renowned Bigfoot researcher, having recorded their voices and many other things. We all went out there and filmed this thing, looked at it thoroughly, and then a few weeks later, some of us went back out there with L.A. Marzulli, and the handprint was gone. It had been erased. We don't know how it happened. We're not sure what or who did it. So you can't prove that there was ever a handprint there unless you believe Don Monroe's and M.K. Davis's photograph. So it looked like a handprint to me. In fact, if you get up really close to it, you could see where what appeared to be the finger or the fingers went down. When they came up, they sort of pulled a ridge of paint or juice or whatever it was. We don't know. There was a slight ridge there. It definitely was not a stain. It wasn't something dropped out of the ceiling. And we were there looking at it, and a whole bunch of guys from the BLM came in. I don't know if it was new guys or who it was, but they were taking a tour of that area, a walking tour. They came in the cave, and everybody looked around, and we talked to them out there at length, and later went up to the BLM office to get some more information on the cave and in that general area. And we don't know if they knew about it from before, after, what, I don't know. We're not sure what happened. But after Don and MK published that story, very quickly, that thing was gone. It was erased by something. People that don't believe in giants, they just had to say there was never anything there. We're lying, okay? You can't prove we're lying. You can't disprove we're lying. You can't go there to the cave and say, yeah, there it is. It's gone. So that's one of the problems when you discover some great archaeological thing, like a drawing or a painting or something on the cave, like here in Texas, Panther Cave, where there was a giant woman found with a baby. As soon as you let the public know, you got some potential some moron coming there and carving his stupid initials right across it, and that happens quite a bit. It's a conundrum. Do you tell and no one knows, or do you tell and a lot of people know and then they destroy it? That's always a conundrum. So that's what we know, that cave was supposed to have been lived in by the race of red-headed giants that were cannibalistic, were terrible, and the Paiute Indians dealt with them for a long time, fought with them, pleaded with them to act like normal humans. They wouldn't. They finally drove 70 or 80 of these giant men into this cave and told them that they came out, they're going to kill them, which they did. They burned the cave they filled it full of branches and limbs and trees and things and burned the cave up. Later on in, I think, 1916, they came in to harvest the Badflannel, which was several feet thick within 500 years, we don't know, and found all these mummified bodies in there with long red hair. They were all taken to supposedly the Smithsonian. On one of our expeditions out there, we talked to a local man, don't even know his name. He just happened to see us, and he was very nervous, but he said, I helped rebury one of those giant skeletons over 8 feet, and he wouldn't tell us where, what, or when, but it was in the last 20 years. And my book, Giants Against Evolution, one of the things I tried to do in there was, there are thousands of accounts of giants. I only put a few of them in the book, a couple of hundred, to show that everywhere you go, there were these men being dug up, especially back in the 1800s. The reason for that is because, there not many have been dug up at that point. So they put in a new road, a new basement, a new ditch. They'd hit these old burials of ordinary people and also these giants. Well, back then, the bones crumbled as soon as they got out in the air, or they didn't know what to do with them. They fell apart, but they would measure them in the ground. They measured the femur usually and come up with a measure of 8 or 9, 10, 12 feet tall.
Do you think the world will see giants again like they apparently did prolifically at one time?
I think we will. I think these are the last times. I was disappointed that the whole world didn't come to an end at Y2K, but it didn't. Computers didn't even crash. What a disappointment.
It was a dud.
The lights stayed on. The world didn't end. I go, man, what a dud. Anyway, it's now 20 years later, and I'm not going to put a date on when the Lord's going to come back. I don't know, but it's getting closer all the time. I believe he will. Life going on like they didn't think it was going to end, and giants, and violence in the earth. Well, man, we got wars wanting to start everywhere. Wars going on, bombing thousands of churches to the ground. The Chinese are bombing churches to the ground. It's as violent as it ever was, if not more so. So should we expect giants? It looks to me like everything else is in place. I won't be surprised. Will they be nice? I don't think they'll be nice.
You've been listening to another free-range Texan Unexplained File. If you would like to get in touch possibly with today's guest, or would like to learn more information about this segment of our free-range Texan Unexplained File, then go to our website at freerangetexan.net. Digital microphone will travel. You're listening to the Free Range Texan News Network. Now, give me that James Earl Jones thing there. Close your eyes and squint. This is FRTNN. Let's try that again. Hi, this is Michael Shawn. Welcome to the Campfire. One of the most famous residences of North Dallas, Texas, is the country western singer Charlie Pride. When Charlie moved in, he was one of the first blacks to live in that area. In case you didn't know, there was a time when black families in North Dallas were about as rare as wisdom teeth on a rooster. One day early on, Charlie was out mowing his lawn when a neighbor lady happened by and assumed he was the yard man. She stopped and asked him how much he would charge to mow her lawn. For fun, Charlie quoted her a price and she agreed. Then Charlie actually mowed the lady's lawn. But when it came time to collect, he called one of his best friends who just happened to be in town and asked him to collect the bill, please. The friend agreed, and the neighbor lady was quite surprised when Elvis Presley showed up and asked for the cash.
Thank you very much.
Great stories around the campfire. During construction of a bridge in Vinegaroon, Texas, a structure collapsed and 10 workers fell. It just so happened that Judge Roy Bean himself was called to the site to hold an inquest. Riding on a mule to the incident, he pronounced all 10 men dead. However, only 7 of them had actually been killed. When questioned on this point by onlookers, the judge nonchalantly told them that it looked to him as though the others were about to die anyway, so he didn't want to make the trip twice. Fortunately for the 3 men, turns out he was wrong, and they survived to tell the tale. And speaking of tales, did you hear about the 2 traveling salesmen on the road when they spotted a sign which read, Mahia, 15 miles? Then the 2 men quickly got into an argument about how to pronounce the name of the small Texas town. One of them said, it's Mexia. And the other one said, no, it's Mahia. Well, as you can imagine, the friendly argument continued, and while they covered those entire 15 miles, they were still kicking it back and forth as they rolled into town. So when they got into town, they decided to stop and ask a local to solve their dilemma. The driver wheeled into the first business establishment that he came to, and both men marched inside to get an answer. As a young lady approached, one of the peddlers asked, Miss, could you please settle an argument and tell us how to pronounce the name of this place? Well, the waitress turned around and she said, Oh, aren't you cute? Sure, sugar. Why, this is the Dairy Queen. Come on back anytime to Michael Shawn's Campfire. Adios, my friends. As we start to pack up episode 20 of the Free Range Texan podcast. Thank you, Joe Taylor, the Mount Blanco Research Facility there, for being on our podcast. Folks at 18PR have provided backup and support, and we always appreciate those people. Foxy the Wonder Dog on complete security. Perhaps you heard her in the background a time or two. Now, go get in the pickup. And the big thank you to all those folks sitting in their snapshots to be on our free-range Texan listener posse. Now, if you have any questions about that, you go to freerangetexan.net, take a look at what we're doing with those on the blog, and then take a look at what we're doing with those on the Free Range Texan Facebook page. So, take us home, sweetie pie.
Thank y'all for listening to the Free Range Texan podcast, produced at A-Team PR Studios out yonder in West Texas, with our host who's been voted the hardest working man in podcasting, Michael Shawn. Feedback or submissions to our program can be submitted on our website, freerangetexan.net. That's freerangetexan.net. This is Sweetie Pie on behalf of Michael Shawn and the crew here in Studio A, where we're all looking forward to spending time with you on our next bi-weekly episode of the Free Range Texan podcast. Y'all come back now. You hear?
Tower, this is Free Range Texan Airways, Podcast 1, ready for takeoff.
Podcast 1, you're cleared for takeoff.
Nose up. Check wheels up.
Wheels up.
Reduce flaps. Mr. Sanders, take us to 10,000 feet. Bring us around to a course of south by southwest.
10,000 feet, south by southwest. Aye, Captain.
Engage autopilot.